Everybody, to another edition of the Saturday Night Power Hour, in this case, Sunday afternoon, because there's so much on deck this week that had to wait a day. But welcome aboard to the Cross Commission's Power Hour. I'm Ryan, we got Safe, we got Jake, and we got a heck of a lot to talk about because heading into the week, it was a matter of, okay, we have a clear pecking order of teams. That got disrupted by Friday. Then after Friday night, it's like, whoa, the Ivy League is back. And then they proceeded to lose 3 out of their next 4 big non-conference games. And then by Saturday, it was at the ACC. It was back into 2022 mode. And then they went 3-0 on Sunday. So the only conclusion we could come up with this college lacrosse season is there are no conclusions. Stick around for the ride because we have got a wild season on our hands, baby. And I think this weekend was the absolute apex of all that. So join us for the next hour. We'll do a little bit of, I guess, maybe a little bit of a different format this week because of how schizophrenic everything is. So I'll leave it up to you guys. But we'll chat about what's going on. So, Jake, let me know when we're ready to go an hour on the clock.
All right. Hold on.
Don't want to false start.
3, 2, 1, go.
So let you guys pick. Where do we want to begin in all the chaos? Do we want to start with today's games?
Who's the number 1 team in the country?
I mean,
who wants to be number 1? Right?
Yeah,
Everybody likes the crown.
Even on a mid-weekend basis where it got passed around from Duke to Virginia to Maryland, and all 3 of them lost in a matter of 3 days. So I mean, I guess at this point, I would say you give it to Denver. They have the head-to-head victory over Hopkins. They're undefeated. They got to win against Cornell. That's also a top 10 win as well. So I think at this point, Denver's your number 1. You can make a case for either Hopkins or Army at number 2, and then all hell breaks loose from 3 going 3 onward.
Man,
that's more than that's what I have.
Yeah, I'd probably go Denver. I mean, has enough time passed? I mean, it was a month ago, that Hopkins-Denver game. I think we can kind of admit, like, if you wanted to blend results and performance on the field, Hopkins has been the best team a month into the season. I don't really think there's, like, question that. Like, they've got wins over Virginia, Georgetown, North Carolina, and then you throw in how they've looked, their team. They look really strong in all areas of the field. Offensively, they put up 16 in Charlottesville yesterday. They won a defensive game at Georgetown. Chase Yearling was fantastic yesterday. They obviously dominated on faceoffs yesterday. Granted, though, that was against UVA's, second-tier faceoff group with Anthony Gabriel out. I mean, I expect they'll get some number 1 votes. I think like 4 teams could get number 1 votes.
Yeah,
I think 5 teams could get number 1 votes. Honestly, like I think Duke might still get number 1 votes.
Yeah. So Gil is saying in the chat, resume is Hopkins, power ranking is Duke. He says he added down the Loyola game and that Hopkins hasn't played a cupcake to this point.
No,
which is fair.
They really haven't. The closest is like Towson, who's still a top.
Yeah, if they beat Loyola, they would have been a top 20 team.
Yeah, I mean, Denver has the 2 best wins. They had the best win in the sense they beat Hopkins, and they also beat Cornell, which is really good. I think in performance and just watching how they've played, I don't know that they've struck me as impressive in totality. Their offense looks really good. I do like their offense a lot. But like those 2 wins, they kind of had to run kind of sort of like the inside straight to get those 2 wins over Hopkins and Cornell. Or they down like 4 to Cornell. Like, I mean, again, look, I think Denver. I mean, I'll probably rank Denver number 1. So I'm not, questioning. And I think, again, those are 2 really, and we always say, you don't hand those wins back, like you don't turn them in for anything, like you win. Army, I think, can make an argument similar to Denver, except I think they maybe look better. I think they beat Hughes and Rutgers. Those aren't as good wins. They're a little less good. But maybe you could argue Army's looked more impressive. Though granted, they had a dog fight
against Lafayette kind of.
But Lafayette, honestly, I think we kind of need to stop doing this. Lafayette might be good.
Lafayette is not the Pat. This is 2 years in a row now where Lafayette's not the Lafayette we were accustomed to. Again, we talked about the upward projection at 6-10.
They're
3-2 now. They got wins. They got a win against Drexel.
Drexel is solid.
Myers is always rising and falling in America. Am I right?
So yeah, and then Hopkins, obviously we talked about. I think you made a good argument for them. Notre Dame just beat Maryland. I don't really think
that's the only issue is that Georgetown lost now. Like they would have been definitive number 1 if they beat Georgetown, but they lost to Georgetown. Yeah.
I think Duke. I think there's an interesting argument with Duke in that the Penn game felt like sort of like Hopkins' game against Denver. Like they looked very undercooked in that game. Mm-hmm. Like they had played like a month of just games against not good teams, and then they finally played a game against a good team. They looked, like they've been left out of the left out of room temperature a little too long.
Yeah.
And then they came back against Princeton and just stomped on them. But I still think it's maybe so. I think that's probably your top 5, and then you got UVA and Maryland 6 and 7. So, but yeah, that's a 7 that's really packed in, like that's so.
And Cornell and Cornell not too far behind, I think, either in that mix.
And State's come back.
Yep, Penn State's looking better. If Syracuse could win an overtime game for once in their lives, they're in that. They could hump.
One thing I was thinking about that. One thing of Jacob's, I was one thing of the Princeton Duke game is like we always not a big thing, but we always talk about like whoever plays the second game of the Final Four on that Saturday kind of has a disadvantage of. Mm-hmm. And I'm just thinking, what time did Princeton, North Carolina actually end? Like 10:30?
Oh God,
it's like 10:15 or so. Yeah.
Yeah.
10:30. I was like, what time do the kids actually go to bed? Maybe close to 11:30, midnight. And this game was.
What time you get back to the
hotel?
The game ends. You got to do interviews.
Yeah, I don't know what
interviews.
Shower.
Yeah, but exactly. And I'm just thinking about. I mean, the Final Four.
Duke got to sleep. Duke just had to go to the dorm.
Duke, you just go to the dorm room or apartment, and you're there.
I don't mean this as Duke slander. I mean the way that they just mauled the Tigers. Pun intended. Was impressive, but I just want to say it was like Princeton did have like we always joke around that Georgetown Denver like game in the Arby's at 2:30 in the afternoon.
CVS.
Like that kind of felt like this. So, like Princeton, you gotta wake up like less than like 36 hours later to play the Blue Devils at home. But that's the schedule. You play the games.
Yeah, dude. Yeah,
but no, I think Hopkins
incentive too. I don't want to. I want to say like not to cut you off. Like,
no, yeah.
I don't think it's obviously there's like look Princeton Penn. Those would have been huge wins if they could have got them. I mean, it's Titanic. I don't know that UNC and Duke came back and won the second, both of them. Just a little bit more, but at home too, like man, you couldn't have gone 0-2 at home, and like they really needed to bounce back. UNC in particular really.
Yeah, the UNC absolutely needed that one, or else they were completely.
They played like in that fourth quarter, and Duke just played angry.
Yeah, Duke played angry. Yeah, and we've been talking about that. Princeton's going to be a team that needs to kind of simmer a little bit. They're going to be. I think we're going to know more about them in Ivy League play. They got a good win. They get a good road win against UNC, but we've seen against Maryland and Duke, they're not quite done cooking yet in terms of that simmering. That's going to be more of an Ivy League project. The thing that the more the more shocking thing, I think, was how Penn went from beating Duke to losing to UNC. That was kind of the befuddling thing.
Is it really?
Well, it is the Penn Quakers. You are right. They are the Penn Quakers. Nothing.
Yeah. Penn's like a cheat code for the Ivy League.
Do not ask for whom the Quaker tolls. The Quaker tolls for thee.
Yeah, it fits right into back in the old days before Dabo really got them humming. Remember how Clemson always had Clemsoning, where one game they're like beating a top tier SEC team, and then the next week against a Sun Belt team they lose.
Like NC State, they lose like NC State.
Yeah.
It reminds me of that week where I was like, in like 2018, was like, if they beat like Duke and Maryland, like they're gonna be number one, and then they beat Duke, I think, because I think it said that on like the broadcast, like there was their first one over Duke's like 2018 or so, like, or not. Well, no, they beat them in 2022. It was like their first one over number one because they beat Duke, and like Duke was number one, I think, in 2018. And then like they lost to Maryland, and then they lost to some like random team, like Patriot League team, like the next week. It's like, okay, maybe I got a little too ahead of myself with that one. But yeah, it's Penn. I don't know that we're gonna
out ahead of your skis too much.
Let me actually go check. It was 2018. They finished that year 7-8. They beat Michigan. They lost to Maryland by 7, but they came back 3 days later and beat Duke. Then they lost by 3 to Penn State.
Okay. Beat Navy.
And then lost to
Villanova.
Granted, that Villanova team made the tournament, so that was one thing. But yeah, it was they beat Princeton, they beat Bucknell, they lost to Cornell by 7. Yeah, they lost to Brown in there. Like,
but that was Brown. Was that Brown's Final Four year? No, that was not Brown's Final Four. That was 6-9.
That was 2018. It was a couple years after. But yeah, like through like
lost to St. Joe's.
They're like 5-5, and their only losses are to Maryland, Penn State, Villanova, Cornell, and Yale, and then they lose to Brown and St. Joe's. It's like
Quaker.
It's Penn. Yeah, I don't really know what to do with them, but yeah.
And then North Carolina, I like after Friday night, it's like, yep, this is exactly why I'm not ranking them in the top 20 because they're not a good team. And then they beat Penn today, and it's like, oh, and that Hopkins loss doesn't look as bad either. Oh. Now we're gonna know nothing about them in the next couple of weeks because we got Hofstra, Wagner, Stony Brook, and High Point before playing Army, but
that's why they really needed this win.
Yeah, because
they looked really unfortunate after that Princeton. That Princeton game was bad. Like it was rough. The Penn game was, they showed some fire. They showed guts, and they had some guys step up. They were looking for, like, they needed guys, like that was my thing. I mentioned at the Princeton game was like Duffy had like half their goals, and it's like you can't just beat Duffy and Petro and those guys. And Matan had 2 and 2 today, and DeMarco had 2 goals, and so they got some guys who stepped up. But I think to finish that point around the poll, I think you got 7 teams feel kind of packed in with each other, but there's no runaway. I mean, how many undefeated teams we got left?
We got Denver Army, the New Jersey Institute of Technology, Quinnipiac.
Oh, wow, the Bobcats.
And I think that's it. I think that's it at this juncture.
Yeah.
Harvard too.
Oh, Harvard.
So yeah, Denver Army, Harvard, Quinnipiac, and NJIT.
Harvard beat Bryant by a goal, Bucknell by a goal, Vermont by 3. Harvard 5-0, and their next 4 games are at Michigan, at Yale, home to Princeton, home to Virginia. We'll see.
This might be one of the ones where on our year where we were doing the Crossies. Remember when Harvard was 5-0
or 1-3?
Or they pull up some huge upsets here. And holy crap!
Yeah, you got
if they go 3-1.
If they go 3-1, they are a hot product.
Yeah, so you got.
We're gonna get Soledad on the pod. If they go 3-1 in this, I'm definitely gonna.
You better make that happen.
8-1 Harvard. Yeah, we need.
Better make that happen. No, they so you got 4 on 5 undefeateds left, and but 2 of them are in the top 10 mix. Then you got a just cluster of 1 lost teams, and all from different conferences. And you got 3 from the Big Ten. You got 3 from the ACC. You got a couple from the Ivy in there. So, yeah, I mean, who's number 1? I don't know. I don't really know. I don't know that next week Denver has Yale next week, and they're at Ohio State and at Duke. Army feels like the one who probably just gets it at some point, just because the schedule.
Light and stuff. They got Holy Cross, Lehigh, at BU, at UNC. But I mean, they should be favored in both of those. But they got past the UMass Rutgers Syracuse stretch unscathed, which I think.
No, they should be favored in every. I mean, look, they should be favored in every game the rest of the season.
It's just that the Patriot League already looks like absolute chaos. BU already has a loss. Loyola already has a loss.
Insane. Yeah, so Army probably gets it at some point, but when does it actually filter out and sort of answer itself? I don't know. It might be next month. I mean,
could be next week. Could be next month. Could be.
Yeah.
Who knows?
And so how many teams? What was the year? This is the most open
since
season.
the year where Hofstra got up to number 2, right?
That was 2017. Oh, God. And that was nuts.
That settled in at the end that Maryland was the number 1,
April, because Maryland and then Ohio State kind of came through a bit, and Cuse was always in there. Cuse was always high up there too, because that was the 1-goal game year. But I mean, this is of all the COVID years, and I guess this kind of makes sense because this is, I think, the least COVID-y of all the sort of COVID years we've had. It's the most open. Last year was obviously, 3 teams were much better than everybody else. 2022 was weird, but you still had the Ivy who hoovered everything up, and the Big Ten was kind of sort of, and of course, obviously, Maryland was better than everyone else.
Yeah. And then 2021, it was clear you had the Final Four were your 4 teams all year.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's the most open year I can recall since 2018 or 19. But I'm thinking, how many teams got to number 1 in, those years? You had, 19. Penn State was number 1 the whole year.
Yeah.
18 was open. And then you had Maryland was number 1 seed, but coming off the championship and a little light because they had lost some guys. Yale obviously came through towards the end. Albany, Duke, I think 3 or 4 or 5 got to number 1. The year that I always think of is the
2013.
2013 is the biggest carnage year.
Mm-hmm.
The number 1 team changed hands every week. I'd have to go back and check exactly how many teams got to number 1, but it felt significant.
It was hot potato.
Yeah, I mean, Cuse got the number 1 seed that year, and they lost 4 games or something like that, which is, a lot for a number 1 seed. That is at least.
But that's the direction we're trending, though, with the number 1 seed.
If we're looking at, we're gonna have 3. You assume? Yeah. I mean, Duke, Notre Dame. And then if it's Hopkins or Denver, probably Denver. I assume it's going to be Denver. I think there's going to be a reticence to rank Army number 1, to be honest with you, just because I think there's a name kind of.
But I'm saying with your potential,
either way, the odds are there'll be 3. There'll be 3 already.
And I think with the teams that are going to have a leg to claim the 1 seeds, this is all before they get into Power Conference season 2. This is before ACC play. This is before Big Ten play. And they're already racking up losses. Even Hopkins has a loss already. So it's going to be very interesting as we go forward. It does have that feel that it's going to be no one's separating themselves from the pack. It's not like Max Verstappen.
That's what we thought last year. It's what we thought last year was going to be before it turned out the 3 ACC teams just were much better than everybody.
Yeah. It's not looking like a runaway like it has been the past couple of years by any means. And as you said, it's at least COVID a year. There's no restrictions anymore. You're kind of seeing the transfer portal kind of peter out a little bit. It's not as nutty.
Mm-hmm.
You're also not seeing as much of an impact from transfers as we have in recent years either.
Yeah, that's a good question. Who's the most impactful transfer in the country right now?
I
mean, I'm really Devin McLean was for Notre Dame was I guess the best offensive player in the portal, and he's been good for him, but he's not he's been really good, but it's not he was never going to be they didn't need him, know.
I would say
Cone, maybe
Mason Cone's been Syracuse's biggest impact. They've been
Zawada.
That's a good one.
Zawada before the pandemic.
Yeah, but all the talk has been about the Princeton guys for Syracuse or the Vermont guys, and it ends up being the D3 transfer for the Orange and Cone. Which is kind of funny.
Yeah, Mason Cone was. Yeah, I think that he's been big. That was a big
You can make a case for Chase. That's the only other one.
Yeah, you can make a case for Chase.
That's a good one.
But it's nothing obviously we're not expecting.
Gabriel from Virginia.
But obviously we weren't expecting anything to be on the level of Fowler at Duke. But even still, it's
no, yeah, I think
not Fowler. I can't remember. Sowers at Duke.
Yeah, but if you're thinking in terms,
we're not getting the Chris Grays out there. They're not coming through that door.
Or Maryland adding Donville and Kahn, or last year Notre Dame had Fake and Tevlin.
Oh God, that's what Maryland's missing, Jake.
Yeah, they needed this. They need a senior, and they need an older experienced guy who can make things happen. And Molliver's but he's coming off a torn up knee, so he's in a similar spot to where Spanos and Burks are, just in terms of and he played. I thought he played well. I thought he played really well today. He was the lone bright spot, and he looked. I thought was it the second goal, the one at the end of the first quarter when he went out to Shorty and just took him right to the goal and scored. That was encouraging because he hadn't done that so far this year. He got on Shorties but hadn't initiated it, and that was the surest sign. When he's at his kind of 100%, he's gonna you have to put a point he could dominate a Shorty. When he played in 21 on the second midfield for him as a freshman, he went at Shorties a lot, and he was a problem because of that. So that was encouraging. It was oh, okay, he's feeling more confident. So yeah, it would have been if there was a Keegan Khan out there this year, this team would look a lot different, I think, or if there was obviously Don Vlacon, yeah, it'd be that was, but there wasn't, there's not that kind of guy type player to sort of to really plug in. It's gonna happen. I think you're seeing that. Yeah, it's across these teams are the best teams so far are Denver. Denver hasn't added anybody. It's just the guys on their roster getting better, and you added Mets in there with them to kind of tweak some things, and they've grown. The Zawada, and Maryland wasn't that Zawada. He wasn't going to transfer to. I don't think he really wanted to leave Michigan, to be honest with you. But I think it was his major. When it opened up was at Duke. So yeah, Zawada was the best player in the Zawada wound up being the best player, but he transferred late. I keep forgetting he's there sometimes. It feels kind of surprising, but he's been a big ad. So Yeah, there weren't game-changing players except we mentioned the specialty areas like goalie, face-off, which I think it's what's going to be for the remainder of the future with the portal. You might get a year where Chris Gray was pre-COVID, he was in that 20. It's there might be a year where a Chris Gray pops up, a true decides he wants to leave or something like that. But overall, I think it's going to be a face-off guy goes in or a goalie goes in, and it's a team like UVA who needed a goalie or Hopkins who needed UVA who needed a Fogo, Hopkins who needed a goalie decides, all right, instead of just, maybe this young guy, can, emerge, we're just going to plug it in now. And if we have a question mark, we're just going to answer it right away. So I think that's an interesting part of when I look at why have, those three big ACC teams at the top, and maybe Duke's maybe. I think we still have a lot to learn with them because we still haven't seen a lot. They might be, the team we thought they were going to be. But why have they kind of come back to the pack a bit more? I think is because what separated them last year, I think, wasn't necessarily that they had so many more stars than everybody else. Obviously they had they got terrific talent at the top of their roster. But Cornell had Adler and Kirst. It's other teams had big name players. Maryland obviously still had Zaps and Maker and guys like that, and Weirman, the less on the offensive end. But it's that they were so insurmountably deep. You looked they had guys you looked on the roster and they would run second midfields full of guys who were either transfers who they could plug in or fifth year guys who took an extra year. Notre Dame's got Tevlin who ran at Yale, who's just doing everything and playing second midfield. So it felt like that was the real separator, is they had just an additional 5-10% that nobody else had. And now this year, because there wasn't as much in the portal to kind of boost everybody up and maybe take those spots and kind of bring some of these other guys to filter in some of those roles, bring them down. And there's also just less fifth year guys hanging around now because the seniors this year are 21 guys, and you're 20 guys. So it's just less of those guys. Obviously I think, Notre Dame, Virginia, Duke, they probably still got the best starters, but it's that's not as much of a separator, and their depth.
Yeah, with Virginia was the big one yesterday. That the depth is not as full as it was last year.
No, and so I think it's kind of brought the field back together to a more natural degree, like you usually would see. It was where
you don't have it. You don't have as many fifth-year Ivies either. Hitting the portal either. They're using up their eligibility by their senior year.
Yeah, and so it's not making depth obviously is it's a key factor. We always talk about you want to have that depth. You want championship weekend when you get
to May. This 2 games in 3 days.
Yeah, but it doesn't exactly make a big difference throughout the whole season did for Maryland in 22 where it's they just ran 2 midfields who and they looked exactly the same every time they went on the field. That stuff isn't supposed to happen normally. It's supposed to be a kind of oh, this guy we haven't seen before, comes out in the Final Four and scores 2 key goals for you. That's depth, not our second midfield just scores 3 goals every game, or we have 5 shorties. It's so, I think that's kind of the big.
All right, so. Yeah, let's, I guess, dive into some of the games. We kind of went over the games from today to a bit. We'll go a little bit more in depth with Maryland, Notre Dame, but I guess we'll go to that because we alluded to it, the Virginia Hopkins game, because I think that one has the biggest impact on everything. I think Hopkins putting it together. Hopkins has looked good, but I think there was, some concerns over the end of the game situations that we saw with the Denver game. They haven't blown out some of those teams, but I think yesterday was definitely the Jays' most complete game that we saw, and definitely showed in that performance. But I mean, A lot of helter-skelter offensive lacrosse. A lot of fun to watch. Oh, sorry. But yeah, a lot of fun to watch with, just how back and forth everything was in that game. And then, Hopkins did a very good job of, having an end of game situation where they, tightened up the bolts and clamped down and got the victory out of it. So, yeah, I think that cements Hopkins as a contender status, to say the least. And fun game to watch overall.
This is the game we love, boys. This is the game that we love. We finally got to see it. Yeah. Because it has the intensity of the old school, Hopkins UVA games. It reminded me of I hated playing the Starja era Cavs during Petro. Like even peak Petro. Like I just felt like they just were tougher. They didn't flinch when it came for like these like really difficult balls, and they were just a contained, reckless abandon. But like this, Hopkins just like matched that energy. It just felt great to just watch it. They're going back and forth. Tough ground balls that Hopkins was like right in there with them. I felt like UVA just kind of like wasn't just as deep as you both were just talking about the depth conversation. It was like this wasn't the UVA team in the last 2 or 3 years, and Hopkins had just progressively gotten better. I told you last year that besides that first quarter, I think Hopkins, so easy to say when you're like down 5-6-1, you're like, oh, well, the last 3 quarters, it was actually pretty good. But it was. It is like that's loser talk usually, and we don't have that here. But that's why going into this game this year, I was like kind of encouraged. I was like, Hopkins pretty much had the same team, just a little bit better, I would say, with goal Chase and like everyone's starting to just had one more year of development. Virginia's still Virginia, but it's just like, a little bit off the edge, given that some of the depth wasn't there. And, I think like just, I was as impressed with Hopkins, Ryan, as you noted, like sometimes it kind of at moments gave me a little bit of flashbacks of Denver of like letting Virginia back into the game, especially late there. I was like, oh God, I didn't want it to go into overtime because I was just like, that was, just Lars time. But for them to just stand up, I was watching the game, my mom was here this weekend. We were watching the game and she was talking when the announcers were like, we're kind of questioning Hopkins' second goal. And I went through the whole thing of like, well, lacrosse, you don't want to really score maybe the second goal, a 2-goal lead because you potentially get them. But I was like, I'm always a fan of just more points is better, Mom. So it's just like, I agree. More points is always better. Yeah, no, it just felt good. Like Hopkins not back until we get to the Final Four. But this, it's getting close. It feels good. They just, I go into every game pretty confident. They, take care of Syracuse, and then suddenly they're 3-0 against the ACC. I haven't said that in, I don't know, maybe a decade and a half since the undefeated season. So yeah, if you're a Jays fan, Adam tweeted out, "Great day to be Blue Jay," and just felt like UVA Hop games of old. That Doyle Smith was been at UVA since 2018. It was just good to finally get it back in Baltimore if you're a Jays fan. So yeah, I just loved it, and it was just vintage aughts era lacrosse. I always find like I make fun of the ACC refs a lot, and they deserve it most of the time. But they do let the kids play. It's not. We've had this discussion about like. The extensive amount of time that refs are like kind of reviewing some calls, and obviously I'm all for player safety, but you can kind of feel like the refs kind of just like similar to like Syracuse Army. I don't think it was like a penalty called until like the third or fourth quarter, felt like. But yeah, these are just great games. We just had a string of like 4 or 5 straight big games that actually lived up to the billing.
Really until today, they were all living up to the hype.
Yeah, it's just a wonderful run, and but yeah, just I'm just filibustering here. Yeah, just great Hopkins win, and
just to point out too with the refereeing, I think it was kind of refreshing to have the whistles swallowed a little bit, and it was an egregious swallowing of the whistles where they're letting teams get away with murder like sometimes we see, but because there has been quite a lot of overcalling, especially with these games where they know they have replay capability. They're just calling 1 and 2 minute unreleasables to review left and right.
And they go They go and check, and then they go and check it at the monitor.
And then
that Georgetown Notre Dame game last week, they spent a half hour in that booth.
Like, the point is that it's to check your call on the field, not that you just like, I don't know, let's just go check it.
Yeah, that Georgetown Notre Dame game, I think half the second half the refs were spending in that room with the glass doors.
They went over to another room. I was usually just like an iPad or something, or just by the
that Maryland Syracuse game. They were calling unreleasables left and right. There were like 6 unreleasable calls in that game.
Well, and the Maryland Notre Dame game today, it's like, I get it, we all get it. Like, I'm, listen, you gotta look, you hit it. This is the thing. It's like sometimes it's like what are the guys supposed to do? It's like, don't hit him in the head, man. Like, I don't know what to tell you. It's like, but some of these, it's like we've all watched lacrosse. Like, we've all seen guys get hit after they score a goal. Like, we've seen it happen. Some of them are pretty bang bang. In which case, is
do we need to call an 1 minute unreleasable?
Exactly. It's like it's unnecessary. If it's one, it's like some of you could just be like, all right, watch it. They'll just watch it, you do it again, you're going to get rung up. And then some of them, they're unnecessary roughness. You give them a minute, it's a dead ball foul, the team, no face off, that's it. Now, because of the, 2 minute, 1 minute unreasonable, they're checking everything to see if there's contact to the head. And it's like, oh, do we have to go 2 minutes on this? Do we have to go? It's like, the ref's job is hard.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, it is. I understand it. It's for us, it's like, for the most part, we know. Again, the Chris Cav one on Dylan Hess last week. It's like that happened live, and you're like, oh my god, you saw that he got hit in the head. Some of these other ones, no, dude, he just hit him in the back, and he hit him late. It's like, yeah, hit him with unnecessary roughness 1 minute if you want. We don't need to go to the monitor to check if there's head contact to make it 1 minute full time. 1 minute full time is silly anyway, because by the time it takes most of these teams to score, it's like.
Yeah, by the time they actually sub in their man up unit, it's already 35 seconds into it. If the team on the kill wins the face off, then the penalty's killed off entirely anyway.
The penalty's over. Whereas 2 minutes, you could maybe win it and lose it and still, but yeah, nonetheless, that's ever. But yeah, no, it was you, Ryan. You made a great point. I was gonna, say that you really get an idea for just how an appreciation, I guess, or just for the pace and flow of the game when we've kind of seen these, games just get impeded by stoppages, and just kind of swallowed up, and it's they're just calling. There was one game this week. I think it was Penn State Yale. I think it was the first quarter. It was I felt like there were 6 penalties stopped in the first quarter. It's every possession is whistle, whistle, whistle. I'm there's just there's no flow to the action. There's no feel of the game, It's and the teams don't, I think, play well in that, when you're on man up, it's a totally different thing playing offense. This was, just you just getting appreciate for how great, and I loved it just because I love, we all, goals can be great. But there's kind of, there's the up and down, kind of goal. Denver Cornell was a fireworks. It was great. There's so many great skill on display. But this was, the number of the Cormier goal at was it 5-5 when there's a collision in midfield and the ball pops out and it goes back the other way. And you just the roar from the crowd, after the Cormier scored. And Virginia's crowds react the crowd of Klockner just reacts differently when Cormier or Schellenberger scores. It's just a different sort of,
that atmosphere was great
because they've been there.
It was loud at Klockner.
Oh yeah, it was amazing. It's Klockner, and they've had some great games. Great opponents so far to start the year there. But yeah, they just kind of react differently, when those, because those are the guys, they know, and those guys feel that and they feed off that. But yeah, the first Sava, you had a, I think you tweeted out, it's like the SpongeBob, like that was just the first quarter, like it was just unreal. Like there was no, and not even was like the penalty. It didn't feel like there was a whistle. Like it didn't feel like there was it was just like, like the ball like wouldn't even go out of play. It was like either there was a goal or like, it saved something, like it just end to end, just, and like there's a hit, or something that causes a turnover and we go back the other way. And that was part of it. Is like, it was how physical the game was. Like, and Hopkins, I thought that was a big part of it. They came in with UVA had the edge on, I thought, 50-50 ground balls early in the game, which I thought was kind of how they were able to get that lead, was they were able to kind of steal some goals off second possessions and things like that. But Hopkins went in with a mindset early of, we're gonna, let you know we're here, and we're gonna hit, we're gonna hit hard. And I felt kind of, vindicated with me and Safe. We talked about on Tuesday in the pod. I said Hopkins had to play fast. They had to push, because if that was a 6-on-6 game, I thought Virginia was the better team. Though I will say the press thing for Hopkins was, it was a slower game in the second half, and they still executed. And they still, but like the fact that like they, in that environment at Klockner, that's how Virginia plays. That's their identity. The crowd loves watching those kind of games, and they hung it, and they really, they kind of they sort of outlasted Virginia, I think a little bit. They had a little more, in the tank, and certainly the face-off, had a lot to do with that. I think I mentioned it. If Gabriel was out, I think you could have shifted the line by a goal and a half, maybe even 2 goals. It was a big factor, and Ireland, came up. So that was, I think, they had to play fast. But then, when it came down to it, in the second half, they executed terrific 6-on-6. Just gotta, tip your cap, to Hopkins. It was, just everything you'd want in a win, in a performance in that environment. The kind that, I said it, like they haven't had. We talked, if Hopkins win that game, it was kind of that changes people's perceptions of the program, and now kind of they're cemented seen as a contender, which I don't think they've been seen as in really. I mean, I don't know, like a long time. Mm-hmm. You could think like decade, like since people have really seen Hopkins as a contender, on the level they are now. That's what beating Virginia does, and Virginia, I mean, like. Schellenberger, man, he looks like he's in a mood. Kind of like he played yesterday. Cormier, so they look imposing still. Like they got, and if they can get Gabriel back, I think it would be a different outcome maybe, but I do think, they got to kind of figure some things out there in terms of their depth, their shorties. They didn't seem to have as many options. They couldn't kind of hold up against Hopkins. So it'll be interesting to see how they kind of adjust. Both Maryland and Virginia, I guess we can kind of get into it. It'd be interesting to see how they both adjust with kind of, sort of a bit of a reprieve over the next week before they play on.
So Notre Dame wire-to-wire win today against Maryland, 14-9. Irish look good, and understatement to say what a great bounce back after Georgetown to really, come back and lay the hammer on the Terps. Really, I think that's probably one of the most impressive regular season wins we've seen out of the Irish in some time, and they've had some big wins, but I feel like the way they've done it today is something we haven't really. We're kind of accustomed to seeing Notre Dame winning these, thrilling, close games against. And whenever they beat Maryland, it's a close one, or they beat a Virginia, it's a close one. Beat a Duke, it's a close one. This one's probably their most dominant big win in a while, I think.
When they beat Duke last year, was it? But then they kind of dominated that one.
17-12. Yeah, you could say that.
That one was. They kind of Duke. They dominate. Maryland, Virginia, if they get the win, it's a close one. This was their first win over Maryland by more than a goal since 2016. Mm-hmm.
When we saw the spread and said the 2-goal Notre Dame favor, we're like, wow, that we were surprised because like usually this rivalry, even when it was 5-4 slogfest, were always decided by a goal, 2 goals at most. no matter who won. And usually, if Notre Dame won, it was in a very close one. So for them to play the way that they did today is something that I know we're beyond that point now that Notre Dame has that title, but it's something that's kind of new to see out of the Irish.
Yeah, I mean, it was, a sort of, a statement, that if they had lost, we kind of mentioned it, like they would have been in a bit of a hole at 2-2, having lost to Georgetown and Maryland. And I do think there would have been, kind of people mentioning 2022 and, having the way that season started and, with people kind of mentioning like the ACC's losing these non-conference games. I'm not saying that was on their mind, but they went out and, clearly had a, just played with a, I think we talked like both teams, came in with a sort of Notre Dame wanted to wash the taste out of their mouth from last week, and Maryland maybe wanted to come out, with sort of the taste from last year. But Notre Dame was the team more ready to play.
More desperation, I would say, too.
Yeah, Notre Dame was more ready to play. They set the tone, and the tone really got to Maryland. By the second quarter, I would say, Maryland just kind of shot themselves in the foot about as much as you possibly could in this game. And look, even if they didn't, like the way this game played out, Liam Entenmann had more saves than Logan McNaney. I think won the faceoff battle. If that game on its own happens, does Notre Dame still probably win? Yes. I do think it's, I don't want to say encouraging is the right word. It's maybe a little surprising, but maybe still encouraging for Maryland that like the fact that, for any game for Maryland where you kind of get told that you're going to lose, I mentioned like during the pod, the preview, if McNaney and Weirman win like 60% both, that's the money zone. Like they're going to win. And even if it's like 55, I think they're good. But any game where they're both below 50 is that they're probably not like that. That's kind of scary territory for them with the way their offense is playing right now. And the fact that when you consider where the game was at in the fourth quarter, where it was Maryland kind of cut it to 3 and kind of had it, within, sort of, I mean, I'm not saying they had a chance to win, but like they hung in there. And you consider how many goals they gave away by just shooting themselves in the foot. I do think that's, I think, Maryland kind of take that and be like, listen, like, we don't just need those guys to play well in order for us to win these games. Like we can, our defense is still, very good and capable of hanging in there. And, we can put together some runs on offense, if we execute. But, Maryland blew 7 clears, something like that.
18 of 24.
And they were all in the first half. Like
that's the thing. And the turnovers too. The second half turnovers was 3 from Maryland, 13 in the first half.
Yeah, what's the? I mean, and we do say. I mean, you just mentioned this. It's one thing to be like, oh, well, the first half, is bad. Like the second half, the second half score is what? It's 1+1 for Notre Dame.
Yeah, Notre Dame had 5, Maryland 4.
And then Notre Dame scored, I think, the last 2. After on Maryland's push, the second half, Maryland, it was an even game. It was, and Maryland, they wiped away the clears, and they played Notre Dame in that. In fact, it was a competitive, and of course, there's score effects to that. Notre Dame's up 4, and then they went up 6. But it was, Maryland had blown 6 clears. They were behind on faceoffs. McNaney had made 6 saves, I think, and he threw one ball just right to Notre Dame to give up a goal. I mean,
what's going on? And then we saw vintage Mac in the third quarter where they had a somewhat. You remember but they were kind of wasted because Entenmann was just as solid at the end. But
yeah.
It felt like that first half was as bad a half as it could have done.
Yes.
If
they had got in it too, I think it would have been interesting. If they got in it too, if they could have but it was 2 is not representative of this game. They should not be down 2. They should be down more.
That's exactly right. I remember us in chat of this feels like Notre Dame should be up 5 at halftime, which is
if they could, because if you think about it, if they could have got in at 7-5,
Well, they were up 4, but
they were up 4. It's like if Maryland could have got it in at 7-5 when they made that little run towards the beginning of the fourth, it could have maybe been a 1 or 2 goal game. And it's like that's when you put the pressure on them, and that's when you're like, and then that's where that's Weirman's money time. Where 1 or 2 Weirman always seems to win those big faceoffs.
It was big Entenmann, man, because 7 saves in the third quarter. That was when they kind of held Notre Dame's offense in check a little bit. It could have been a run. That was when I thought Mac was playing his best. That one save where it was like, was it right on Cav? I think it was, where like they jumped in the air. But yeah, Entenmann 7 saves just like kind of just shut down like any chance of like really because I was like, if Maryland can catch a 2 going into the fourth, I was like, that would have been a huge coup. Like it would have been like enormous. But
to me, when it was at 4 in the fourth, I'm like, I always look at Maryland's games like if they are within 2 with the ball with 2 minutes left, they are in this game because they have a chance to score, and if they score, Weirman's going to win the faceoff. That's always how I look at it. I'm like, just get to 2 with like 2 minutes left because you just need one shot, you score. And then if you go to a face-off, I think Weirman's going to win it. And I think that's probably how they approach it. Is like we got to go to the face-off dot with like 2 minutes left. Weirman's going to win it. So mine was just like just get it to 2 with like 3 minutes, 2 minutes left, and you could have been there. But look, Notre Dame was a better team. But yeah, Maryland just and the thing is, look, like Notre Dame made them feel footsteps. Like they put pressure on early with the ride, and then. The second quarter, it was just self-inflicted. Like it's Mac throws a bad his outlet passes today was bad. I haven't seen him play that poor in terms of his that. I wonder if it's coming back from the knee. He didn't feel as some like before some of those. There's an aggressiveness he plays with that he did not have today. He looked shook, and some of that's it is Notre Dame. Like you got to give him credit. Zaps throws like. What is it, at midfield? There's an easy pass, and he just throws it behind the guy. It gets dropped. They're dropped and again, you got to give Notre Dame credit. Like that's what they do to you is they apply the pressure of the ride and they make you feel uncomfortable, and then you just
and the Arlotta crowd gets into it as well. They feed off of that.
5,000 on the box score. I don't know if that counts all the people just hanging out on the side, but yeah, it felt was like loud environment.
So yeah,
that's the Chiefs was an away game. Richmond away game for Maryland. It felt like not that they're exhausted or whatever. They're all children, kids, but like this is
tough road
another not cupcake game on a road. Yeah, and a team that was just like I'm sure Notre Dame was already raring for Maryland, but coming off of the loss of Georgetown.
Yeah, I think coming out the loss, you hear the perceptions of the ACC after yesterday. I feel like they were very fired up about wanting to make a statement after that.
Okay. No, Maryland. Again, it was as bad as they could have played, but look, it did highlight like their offense just is not at the point yet where they can afford that kind of, look, an old Maryland team that we saw, how many Maryland teams do we see that could have, got 40% of the faceoffs, and maybe good goalie play, and they still were always in the game and won the game because their offense executed at such a high level. That's not this Maryland team. End of the day, like their defense was still great, but a +8 possession advantage for Notre Dame. Like Maryland is not going to win a game this year, at least at this point, where they are giving up 10 possessions to their team. And they, if you don't blow 6 clears, you don't have 16 turnovers. It's like, yeah, maybe it's 11-9 and you're in it, and you have a shot. But yeah, their offense, is just not that, it's, not that. Like, they were already behind the 8 ball with the fact that, like Notre Dame won the specialty areas. That was, that's Maryland right now. That's where Maryland's at. Like, they have one of the best, if not the best defense in the country. Have a great goalie. So that, keep it low, and then maintain, tilt the field, give that offense possessions. Look, it's a top 5 defense and a top 5 goalie and a top 5 faceoff guy with a top 30 offense. You can go far with
Jake, I was saying like you guys missed Donville, and I was really thinking about it a little more. I was like, I miss Khan the most, I think, because Keegan from behind the X
they
could
need
just
a
get that.
they need a. I think they miss Khan. Khan.
I mean, they miss Logan. They miss Jared.
Yeah, I mean, they had like 3 Tewaaraton winners in like 5 years. Like, I'd give me one of those guys. Like they had 3 Tewaaraton winners in 5 years, and then like in the 2 years they didn't win, they had Jared was a finalist and Connor Kelly was a finalist. Yeah. Like so, but Khan, yes, I think. Also, they miss Tony. They need a shooter. They need a dude who can hit some shots. Like the teams play them like they know how the offense is going to run. That they want to pass the ball and they want to kind of push it inside, and so it's like you need to do. That's what Tony was so great at. It's like, okay, like yeah, we're gonna have all this ball movement and we're gonna hit guys on the crease and the backside and defend that. And then we're just gonna hit. Tony's gonna hit a 20-yard shot out from the outside.
And absolutely. The thing I just feel, because just watching this offense, it's like they're like a half second behind, it feels like, and it's just like with Connor, just like he always could beat his dude with the behind the, and then that gave you that extra half second. That's why everything looks so smooth and easy, because but yeah, no, they're just it's a 30 top third, top third offense with like Ferrari, everything else, It reminds me almost kind of like those, it's not that bad, but those memes where they're like, star quarterbacks of Lamborghini in like a, a trap house setting, like, their offense isn't that bad. It's just like, I mean, they're 5-1.
Yeah, it needs to get to like top 15. If it gets to top 15, they can win a title. At this point, the way it is now, do I think they can? No, I don't. Like, I think you saw that. Like, I still think it is somewhat like they were in the game, even though they, kind of like they would have been in if they didn't butcher themselves like how many field clears on it. But yeah, it's like they can't afford, McNaney and Weirman not having great games. To a degree, like it's, and look, any team is like, that's true in general. It's like, hey, when your face-off guy and your goalie are going to play bad. Well, not gonna be an easy day,
Well, no, you're right. Like, but like they can't. I don't think they can afford like replacement level, almost like or like.
Yeah, like that's 50, It was basically, it was Notre Dame edged it. If it was even, the game would have been basically like, they probably would have lost, and like that tells you like. The 5 goals was the fact that they built themselves, they put themselves behind with all the other mistakes. It's like at the moment they can't beat these teams unless they have, above the, like they need 55%. They need to be the better goalie, and they need Weirman to win 55%. That's to win these games. That's what they need at the moment. And look, it's February, it's March. Matt Rambo didn't become Matt Rambo till like the end of his sophomore year, the beginning of his junior year.
He didn't know how to throw an assist to his senior year.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and Urksa is, still like the sophomore, early in the summer. Spanos still summer. So yeah, might come. But no, this was, for Notre Dame, this was kind of a, it wasn't their best performance, I thought. Again, like they should have beat Maryland by a lot. I think they should have beaten by more. But it was, I think, kind of a sort of like testament to what Notre Dame does well. Like, when you consider like just how they impacted the game with the ride and things like that, and the crowd and all that. You saw how the ways in which their identity can just, impact the game.
Absolutely not bad. The Notre Dame ride. I mean, it feels like something like it should be some simple fix, like because it is kind of a punt return, but you don't have like as many like defenders coming at you like a punt returner would. But it's like infuriating with I'm sure it's a Maryland fan that first half with like just failing to get the ball over after like a couple decent defensive like stands, and then they just like
it's like 3 goals. It's like 3 goals they just gave in a 4-goal. You give 3 goals away just off that. Yeah, it's killer.
Penn State. What a weird one that one was. Penn State's frantic comeback there. I think that's another case of if Yale had played some more games outside of Villanova and Colgate, do they finish that one up? Whereas, Penn State has kind of gotten their legs in with that. But, yeah, what a wild one that one was.
All right, Tams, the adjuster or the chiropractor?
The adjuster, because the chiropractor is going to get us a cease and desist from John Rothstein.
The adjuster is good.
Yeah, insurance adjusters, that's what they do. They just go in, they cook the numbers, and they come back.
They the way they make it is like it's. I was thinking, I tweeted like it was like 9-2 or something. I'm like, listen, they could make a run in this. Like we've seen them do it. I just didn't know if their defense could stop Yale, like because how Yale. And in the third quarter, like they made a run and Yale got they built it back to 4, and then Penn State threw like a zone at them, and they kind of like they did to Princeton in the first round game. Like it just like Tim is just like throwing like everything. He's just like in the just in the lab just all the time. Just like it's all right. It is something to watch. It's like we talk about like that. That's just a team. There's just grown men, man. Like you're just just a hard hat guy. Got their union credential.
He's just an everyman. Looks like John Hamm with like a genius level brain for math, like how to fix lacrosse like second half adjustments.
Yeah, you gotta. I mean, it was wild. Yeah, Yale in the fourth quarter, like and overtime, scored on like 1 of 10 possessions after scoring like 14 before that. Penn State's offense was doing nothing, and then second half they just, everything worked. They had they started really shifting it to like their shorties, attacking out of the box more, and then kind of getting the ball to TJ. It's what we see them. It was kind of the stuff they do, like where instead of like starting the ball with TJ Malone, they kind of started with their shorties and then kind of use those 2-man games to free up Malone more. And he had like 7 points in the second half. The points he produced, like he really I'm not saying he's underrated because he's not, but the production he puts up does kind of go unnoticed. He just puts up some gargantuan box scores. It's like, he had like 9 points. He had like a 7-point game earlier this year, too, just almost entirely off like assists. He's got 25 points in 5. He got 25 points in 4 games.
We got a time check real quick because it looks like we're just.
Okay.
So just one thing from Holden. He said they said Maryland needs a quarterback, great talent, great coach, but without an on-field quarterback, Tillman's chess style play will struggle against top teams. Still a top 4 to 8 team, but who is that guy that still owns the field? That's I think a valid critique. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think he's 100% right. It's the issue they have is that they're it worked well. It worked great. Like Safe mentioned with like Kahn and Wisnowski was the best player on the offense, but he wasn't the quarterback. But it still worked because Kahn was the quarterback, and so Kahn could beat his man behind the cage, and and then Logan was just so you had to defend Logan in so many ways, and so you still had a very good quarterback, while also having like that, and then they didn't really have with Jared. It was different because Jared was just the game breaker. He just broke the code. It was I'm just gonna run past you instead. Okay, well sure. And then of course Rambo and Kelly and all. So the thing they have now is that Molliver is the best fit to be the quarterback of the offense because he has all the skills for it. He's a phenomenal passer. He's the smartest player in the offense, but he's working his way back from an injury. And he's clearly, as we kind of talked about earlier, he's not set up to be he's not at his most equipped dodging yet. And it's hard. We see that with Georgetown with Haley. If your quarterback can't truly be a dodging threat, you become more limited. Maryland's best dodging threat is Urksa, clearly, But Urksa, and you see this a lot, he's like more like athlete than like his physical tools are more ahead of his brain at the moment. I feel like it's like he plays the game faster than sometimes it feels like he can kind of because his physical tools are incredible. And like when he can get a step on guys, forget about it. And when he's aggressive enough and like he knows sense when he can attack a matchup. We saw it against Cuse in the Dome. Like, I can get this matchup, and he took over the game that way. But when it's not there, he doesn't have the other kind of tools to be the quarterback. So they're just kind of stuck in this sort of middle ground of like, well, our best dodger can't really be the quarterback, and our quarterback isn't quite yet at the ability to dodge. So we're trying to like meet in the middle somewhere, and it's not quite working yet. So they need Molliver has got to kind of, just keep come back from the injury and gaining his confidence and become a dodging threat. And if he can do that, then Urksa is just freed up to just, dodge, just go at dudes. You just put your foot in the ground and attack. Mm-hmm. Or you got to wait to what happened with, like I mentioned with Rambo, where it was like Rambo when he came in was, he was a bull dodger. Like he just, he put his shoulder into dudes and he, get inside and score goals. It wasn't until later that he took, command of the offense in his, later in the sophomore year, early in the junior year, which I think will come for Urksa because that's what Maryland does. Like guys get better throughout, however how many years in the program. Connor Kelly, his freshman year, was just a shooter. Like, and then by the end, he had 40 assists. So like that's the thing. It's like Molliver's the more ideal suited guy. It's hopefully he can become, back to the dodging threat he looked like when he was a freshman and sophomore. Urksa is the best dodger, but the other skills aren't there yet. He has a lot of turnovers, and so they're just kind of met in, this kind of squishy middle.
All right, so other games we're pointing out, chaos in the Patriot League. Colgate beats Loyola 14-11. Colgate has wins over Penn State and Loyola at this stage of the season, which is wild.
Yes.
I love this thing. I love this thing Colgate's doing, where like they like lose a bad game. It's like, okay, we can move on from this. Like, and then they come back.
Like,
like
well, if that was
surprise, bitch.
If that was something, then how about Navy beating PU 16-9? It's like, oh, they lost to Towson 17-5. They lost to Penn State 13-3. We can finally, we'll keep an eye on the Navy thread on the message boards because that's always entertaining. But they beat BU 16-9. Like, what the hell is going on? Patriot League, baby.
BU did lose to Bryant by like 6 goals. And BU's wins are over St. Joe's, Vermont, and Brown, who, let's say, there are some unfortunate situations going on.
Those are 3 teams that are generally way better than where they are now and have a combined 2 wins right now.
So yeah, BU. I mean, I don't know. Let's just say there's a lot. I get a lot fewer messages about BU needs to be ranked in the poll now than I did a month ago.
Close one. Yeah, we had a couple close ones. UMass beats Albany in the I-90 Derby, 12-11. Utah over Marquette 9-8. Bellarmine over Marist 11-10. Dartmouth over Siena 12-11. Those are your close games. And I guess the other game of consequence, Cornell over Ohio State 15-11.
Michigan
beating beating Delaware 13-8 as well. So those are your other 2 games of consequence. Good win for Michigan there.
At one point in time, you had like the 8th or 9th highest, or best odds to win the title. What do you think the Terriers are at right now?
What were their plus 20,000?
Oh, not plus 5, but they were like plus 1,800.
It was like genuinely like kind of like freakish. They had the same.
They were higher than Penn State or something. They were like higher than a quarterfinal. It
was genuinely kind of like kind of scary.
Michigan and Cornell. I think we're higher than them or something.
But yeah, good win for Michigan over Delaware
right.
too. That was a road game, challenging environment, so that's a good one for them.
Yeah.
Blue Hens, though, 2 straight losses. Then they got Syracuse in 2 weeks, so they gotta get things righted before CAA play.
Who does Syracuse have next?
Oh, Johns Hopkins. Saturday night lacrosse. Except that they put it in friggin' Charlotte, North Carolina.
As long as we got a stream right and something that's like actually
it's ESPN,
ESPN Plus stream
Saturday night. I mean, listen,
could do worse. You could.
Yeah, could.
It's on ESPN Plus, not ESPNU. That means we're gonna get all the commercials for the Essex half marathon benefiting the Chesapeake Dog Shelter, where you can meet your forever friend.
I love the nasal drip commercials that we got throughout this.
If I had to see the Cheddar's hidden New York show or whatever, New York, whatever, it's been like the same commercial for the same episodes as it is from 2 years ago when I was watching the NHL on ESPN Plus. I'm starting to think that this show isn't really in its second season. I think it's just showing the same episodes over and over again.
It's Q's Hopkins. Q's Hopkins haven't been on ESPN. The only it was on ESPNU was that one time they put it on a Sunday.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Was
that the year you guys came out late in that second half? Remember that year?
That was 2 years ago.
No, that was an ESPN 3 game. I remember.
The last time before that was 2013. I want to say it's just been years of it on.
Yep.
Yeah, it's years.
Your biggest audience, because they got to push them onto the other platforms.
Well, it's something called March Madness.
I think it's basketball.
And now that women's basketball has reached new heights, that's taken away even more slots from lacrosse on TV. So,
I think it's basketball.
Well, on that note,
but no, that's actually going to shape up nice because Hughes game Saturday. I'm going to try to. I think I'm going to try to go to Rutgers, Princeton on Sunday because that's at noon. That's it. We're going to do our show Sunday. We all have time, or I don't know if we'll do a Saturday night. But right after the Hughes game, that would be kind of fun. Right at the power.
If the game is good, that would be. It would be pretty lit. Rutgers, we got Rutgers, Princeton, Denver, Yale.
Solid Sunday.
Yeah, did we have? But I think we could do it Saturday. Yeah. So if we want to run down quickly the since this got a lot of play on the broadcasts, kind of the non-conference losses. If we want to run down the out-of-conference record right now, which I'll tweet out later. The ACC is currently 19-7, which is more losses than the ACC had non-con all of last year. In 2022, for comparison, the ACC was, I think, 24-12 by the end of March. There were a few spare non-con games they played in April. I think Virginia beat a couple, easy opponents, and then I think that was the year Syracuse lost to Albany. But so basically, we'll see. It could go either. There's still some. Yeah, Clark mentioned there's still a lot of games left. Though I will say, it is getting to the point where it is.
We're getting into conference play now. Yeah.
The math is forming to a solid degree. But look, if the ACC goes on and wins out, then it'll look like last year. If they take some more hits, if they take a lot of hits, it'll be like 2022. I think the more likely answer is that those were both outliers.
Yeah, I think today with Duke and what Duke and Notre Dame did, it's likely you're going to be at least 3, probably. Yeah.
Well, yes, yeah. I'll get to it. Yeah. So America East is 14-23. The ASUN is 13-27. The A10 is 14-15. The Big East is 16-16. The Big Ten is 26-7. The CAA is 18-21. The Ivy League is 18-12. The MAC is 20-32, and the Patriot is 21-19.
With undefeated Army.
Yes. So basically what you kind of get out of, and look, this is only sort of one part of the picture. It gives you of like how, these teams are going to sort of like, that's one component of it where you get into conference play, is that it's very, it's even, there's a even, dispersion like right now. The Big Ten's, I think it's at like high 70s, maybe 80%. The ACC's at, high 60s, the Ivy's in mid to kind of 60s there. This is like, in terms of, if you're kind of like wondering where it's going, is that it looks like a very, very even dispersion of, bids, because there's not one conference that's separating itself from the rest. And there's not, and there's 3 that like have teams that have made, substantive kind of, impacts, or like, have
Yeah,
chances
and then
to.
with
So,
Army and Denver, now that they kind of have at large insurance with what they've built up so far too, which makes it all the more interesting.
Yeah, Army, I don't know if they have like assurance, but it's just sort of like you presume that they will just keep winning, and if they keep winning, then yeah, like, but I think there's only like 1 or 2 teams that have like, the only Hopkins has like at-large assurance right now. Like Hopkins is going to make the tournament, but nonetheless, Maryland might as well, Virginia maybe, just because you're assuming like they're going to finish above 500, and if they finish above 500 with their schedules. But yeah, it's like, this looks like a very even dispersion of, teams. It's like the ACC, Big Ten, Ivy, none of it's like, the Big Ten and the ACC are definitely a cut above the Ivy, but they're not running. There's no clear, like the ACC was last year, or the Ivy was in 2022. And then the Big East obviously has, Denver has made the Big East has 3 significant wins.
Denver over Hopkins, Georgetown over Notre Dame. Denver over Cornell.
Denver over Cornell. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Army, Army's done some, looks like a significant potential what they could do as well. In the event that anything like that happens. But so yeah, it looks like a very, even kind of landscape. It can change, but like, yeah, is that, the way, the math has, and you can check the RPI is up right now if you go to pro.lacrossereference.com/RPI. Like it's, it's up there. And that's what it looks like. Like if you look at the current RPI top 10, which again, it's hard, like looking at that's a little, it's still a little early, but there are 4 Big Ten teams. There's 2 ACC teams. There's 2 Ivy League teams. There's Army and Denver.
So we're going to have a good spread this year.
Yeah, it should be. The way it's shaping up right now.
Yeah, we're not going to be talking about one conference overpowering all the others.
No, yeah. It looks like a very, kind of even sort of split amongst,
all right. Well, it's a beautiful Sunday. We want to get back out and about, I think, right?
Absolutely.
All righty. So, yeah, basically embrace the chaos, enjoy the ride, because, man, we have had a fun start to this season. I think this weekend really encapsulated everything. So, as always, you can subscribe to us on the Patreon at the Crosse Commission, patreon.com/the Crosse Commission. And you can subscribe to us. $6 a month gets you all sorts of insights, exclusive content, and a lot more to go around. You could also subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Jake and Safe midweek will have their usual preview of the weekend on the Crosse Commission podcast too. Subscribe on our YouTube page so that way you get the bing notification whenever we go live. As we said, we'll see what's what. Some weeks we'll be live on YouTube. Others will be Patreon exclusive. We'll let you know either way. And you can also follow us on Twitter. We're at college_cross for the Crosse Commission. You can also follow me at RyanMcD29.
At Jake_is on.
I'm at Erie_.
As always, we thank you for listening. And